Is it now? The host is not in the meeting yet. The host is not in the meeting yet. Sometimes they go around.
All right, good afternoon. We have everyone? I'm not sure.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. This is Thomas Schoenberger.
Your Honor, this is Dennis Klein. I'm on the line. It seems that there are a lot of other people on the line also here, showing up as 24 participants.
Well, it's the
Interested parties.
what I'm going to ask is anyone who is not speaking. So right now it's just going to be Mr. Klein and Mr. Schoenberger. Everyone else just has to mute their mics. Appearances virtually are the same as an appearance in court. It's a public proceeding, so people have the right to listen. On Zoom is the same as they'd have the right to sit in a courtroom and listen. So as long as there's no disruption of the proceedings and people have their microphones muted, they have a right to sit in. I do have the ability, if I have to electronically exclude people or put them in waiting rooms, but everyone has a right to listen. Okay, we're back on the motion for a temporary injunction based on the first amended complaint. And so it's plaintiff's burden on the motion for temporary injunction. So I'm going to let you begin. I've already got an introduction about what the case is about from both sides. So I just want to get into whatever evidence the parties intend to introduce and move on with this. So Mr. Klein, you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead.
First, Your Honor, just as a preliminary matter, I just thought it was important to notify the court of a threat that I personally received from Mr. Schoenberger today. And I raised this because it's illustrative of the type of defamation and statements that have been made against my client, Mr. Hoffman. I received an email this afternoon from Mr. Schoenberger stating that your public attacks on me will have several deleterious results. And he says, Judge Kelley will now be aware. Number two, I am via lawyer asking for you to be disbarred and prosecuted for organized gang stalking. I raise this because it's similar to the type of allegations of my client as being part of organized crime and a gang against Mr. Schoenberger.
Okay, let's go ahead and get to what evidence you want to present or argument you want to make with respect to the entry of a temporary injunction. I think we're all familiar with the elements that must be met. There must be a substantial likelihood of success of the merits. There must be irreparable harm. There must be lack of an adequate remedy at law, and there must be consideration of the public interest. those are the four elements necessary, as we all know, for a temporary injunction. So with that said, again, I'm waiting to hear, Mr. Klein, what do you want to present?
Thank you, Your Honor. One other, I just want to make sure I yesterday addressed the court whether or not the defendant would be participating by video in this case. I just ask Your Honor what the resolution of that is.
He's not required to participate by video. I cannot take testimony from anyone I cannot see, because the rules of the Supreme Court during the COVID-19 crisis have been suspended with respect to the swearing of witnesses, but those rules require that I both see and hear the person being sworn. So if Mr. Hoffman doesn't, I'm not sorry, Mr. Hoffman, if Mr. Schoenberger doesn't want to offer testimony, then he's permitted to appear just by video, and I'm sorry, just by audio, not by video. So there's no rule that requires someone to appear by video.
Thank you, Your Honor. Moving on, in connection with the claims that are in this case. First, let me just give you a tiny bit of background on Mr. Hoffman, my client, and the reason why we're bringing this case. Mr. Hoffman is a very successful investment manager. He lives in Palm Beach County. He maintains relationship with prominent and well-known individuals in the financial markets and the financial management industry. And obviously somebody in that industry, in that area, relies upon their reputation and integrity to attract and maintain investment clients. When we have a case like this, where there's defamation that my client is a murderer, or my client is a crook, or he's part of organized crime, or he's part of the Israeli mob, that certainly impacts my client's ability to do business and tarnishes his reputation. And the reason why we're seeking the injunction here in connection with the tortious interference with business count. The other thing that's important about, you've disappeared, Your Honor?
I'm here.
Okay, there it is, came back. What's also important is that my client's a well-respected philanthropist who individually and solely funded and produced an important documentary which exposed child sexual abuse in Hollywood. And this documentary was entitled An Open Secret. I give you this background because it's important in connection with the injunction and the irreparable harm for the business reputation of my client. Your Honor, I have a presentation that I've broken into three parts. The first part is some of the background of the defendant in this case and the history. The second is the specific defamation allegations, which we're talking about in this complaint. And the third is the tie that the defendant has with third parties, in that the defamation that he has defamed my client, but he's also engaged in encouraging other people to defame my client. So based upon that, I anticipate that this will take about 20 minutes. Is that appropriate, Your Honor? Or do you want me to skip to any specific?
Your presentation is your presentation, and then I'll hear from Mr. Schoenberger. But are you going to call witnesses, or what?
No, Your Honor, I'm going to rely upon the pleadings. It'll all be by presentation.
Okay, well, go ahead, proceed, then I'll hear from Mr. Schoenberger.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. Let me start out first, Your Honor, that as we mentioned yesterday in our letter to the court, this defamation hasn't stopped with the filing of the lawsuit and the service of the lawsuit. Since the hearing—
Your Honor, may I interject very quickly? It's very important.
What
okay. I'd like to ask for an emergency motion for injunctive relief for suppression of the gag order. Your proceedings are allowed to be heard by public, but they were weaponized just as I predicted. When you gave an admonishment to both sides, I listened to your order letter to letter. I have made no mention of Mr. Hoffman or his associates online. There have been over 45 attacks on me, including memes made on me, including attacks on my health. I have been accused of being brain damaged. You can imagine the harm that's done to my career. So with this presentation being forward, it is going to be weaponized against me once again. If Mr. Hoffman was scared about defamation, why has he spent 80 hours on various very public, very visible YouTube shows, including prior to August 13th? He gave out the Zoom information, including the password, and he made it out like it was going to be a paid for view event, which it was, because it was on a monetized YouTube channel. And I have presented evidence to you under an emergency motion that shows clearly that I am being attacked, that I am being defamed. I have made no motion, and there's been over 40 people who have attacked me online. I got a phone call mocking me, saying, "Why don't you go find a bridge to jump off of? Gabe Hoffman owns every judge in Palm County." This is a kind of, and I presented evidence for you. It is under an emergency motion. So while Mr. Klein is allowed to mispronounce deleterious and talk about a 20-minute narrative, I urge you, Your Honor, that is going to be weaponized. That is going to be used to further arm me.
Mr. Schoenberger, and let me speak for just a moment.
Sure.
I cannot gag a public hearing. In fact, a gag order is rarely ever appropriate, even for out-of-court statements. So, as I've mentioned, this is it's a hearing. They're entitled to present whatever evidence they think supports their position in this hearing. You're entitled to do the same. And it's, I don't like to use the phrase "it is what it is," because that seems a little trite, and I don't want to sound that way. But in an open forum like this, in a public hearing, there is no gagging of the presentation by either side. It is, like I said, it's presented, I consider it, I make my ruling. It's a public event. I can't gag it. It's frankly against the law to do that. So,
okay, all right.
I'm hearing your concern, but if you've got a counter, motion for injunctive relief at some point you want to bring, I mean, anyone that wants to be
I've
heard.
already filed it.
So I'll hear everyone's positions, and I'll try to make an intelligent ruling at the end based on the law as I
Thank you very
understand.
much. Thank you, Your
So,
Honor.
all right. So, Mr. Klein, go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. Can I just raise one thing? This is similar, as you said, to individuals that are sitting in the courtroom that are on the Zoom hearing here. I am seeing individuals holding up notes and holding up signs in connection with this Zoom hearing, and that certainly wouldn't be appropriate if we were in court. And I don't believe that it is appropriate on Zoom.
Well, I haven't seen any signs held up, but I would just admonish anyone online, it's not appropriate to hold up signs or to interfere in the presentation of the case in any way. I mean, some people use, instead of participating on video, they will have, a screensaver shot or a picture of themselves or something else like that. I've seen that. I haven't seen anything else. I'm just admonishing everyone. If I see anything inappropriate, I have the ability to remove you from the Zoom hearing. I can kick people out. But that said, as long as there's no interference with the hearing, it's a public hearing. It's just like a courtroom. I do agree, Mr. Klein. If I had people in my courtroom holding up signs, then I'd have the deputy do something about it. If I see any inappropriate behavior here, I'll do it myself. I have the deputy here, but I'll do it electronically myself. So
Thank you.
let's go ahead and proceed. I want to hear the argument. I know everyone's passionate about this case. So
Thank you, Your Honor.
hear what everyone has to say.
Well, Your Honor, at the previous hearing, which we held last week, the defendant made repeated pledges to the court that he was going to refrain from defaming my client further between then and this hearing. There were 3 instances that I pointed out in my letter to the court yesterday, attaching evidence. One was defamatory post on a video where he attacked Mr. Hoffman as a suspect number one in the imagined Isaac Cappy murder. On August 18th, he defamed Mr. Hoffman as paying a person that he referred to as a meatball Manuel Chavez of Carson City, Nevada, with imagined CIA buddies. And that also on the 17th, which is probably the most serious and consistent with what we've been seeing here, he created a post on Twitter in which he defamed Mr. Hoffman as part of an imagined Jewish mob, and he targeted Mr. Hoffman with anti-Semitic hatred as a Jewish supremacist. Since August 13, I can represent my client has made no public mention whatsoever of Mr. Schoenberger or this case, neither verbally or in any posts on social media. And while Mr. Schoenberg might be imagining otherwise, he doesn't present any specific evidence to substantiate it. And in fact, before this hearing, shortly before this hearing, Mr. Schoenberg posted on the internet a request for donations to fund his cause in connection with this litigation. That's just what's happened in the past week, Your Honor. And let me now back up and talk a little bit first about Mr. Schoenberger and the background of Mr. Schoenberger. I've already mentioned my client and his reputation in the business community and how this is being harmed. But Mr. Schoenberger has a history of numerous criminal convictions, stalking, harassment, defamation, threats, fraud, imagined conspiracies against him, and disregard for the law. All of this is contained in the exhibits that we have filed with the court. He's also, in connection with Twitter and YouTube and other platforms, he's repeatedly and flagrantly disregarded the terms of service. He's been permanently suspended by Twitter and YouTube for violations. And what he does is he creates replacement accounts and goes back on both of those. And we documented this again in, I believe it was tab E of our supplement. So with this background, it shouldn't come as any surprise that my client is being susceptible. He's being attacked as Mr. Schoenberger has attacked other people on the internet. Some of the examples quickly that I will go through, that I will mention, all of these are contained in the exhibits that we filed, and we filed hundreds of pages, as the court knows, of exhibit. He has been accused of stalking a woman named Diane Nordstrom on social media with obscene and absurd defamatory claims of having, done horrible things in connection with animals. In fact, Mr. Schoenberger was recently described in a February 2020 article in the Daily Beast as a notorious internet provocateur. And in September 17, was an owner of a company called Shadowbox, which launched a self-proclaimed elite company that promised to use bots and sow targeted chaos to defend its clients online. He was initially served, this case was initially filed. It took us 3 months to serve Mr. Schoenberger, and during that time, he hasn't filed a single substantive response other than the imaginary postings that are being made on the internet. And he's escalated his campaign against my client, and he's encouraged third parties to join this assault. In fact, he's created over 50 videos on YouTube and hundreds of social media postings in just the 3 months since the service here. Mr. Schoenberger has had a number of run-ins with the law. There are at least, and we put this in the record, Your Honor, so I'm not speaking here, out of turn. He has at least 4 current restraining orders issued against him by the court. One of them involves Lisa Marie Vizza in connection with civil harassment in a case in Napa Valley. And in just the last couple of months, 2 protective orders against Mr. Schoenberg were separately granted by courts in Pennsylvania and Nevada. And we included copies of those in our pleadings. He's pled no contest to felony stalking convictions in Napa County. He's had criminal actions brought against him in connection with the stalking. In 2010, there was a restraining order. He was under probation. A warrant was issued. His probation was revoked. He was ordered to pay restitution to the court. All of this is in the record that we have filed, Your Honor. And I think it's important because it helps the court understand what we're dealing with here and how serious this is and what my client is being forced to deal with in connection with this. He has a DUI. His probation was similarly revoked. There was a warrant to appear. All of this, again, is contained in the documents that we have filed with the court. He's also made, as you've heard during this hearing already and during the previous hearings, he makes highly questionable medical claims in order to justify some of his conduct. And we've even put in evidence to show that he made a medical claim that he was bitten by a brown recluse spider a year and a half earlier with ongoing effects that are still debilitating in connection with this. So there's no documented evidence to substantiate any of these claims, and these were discussed at the last hearing. Your Honor, I have a number of things in connection with the various claims of Mr. Schoenberger, stalking convictions. He's testified in the Gautier complaint that he lost.
Mr. Klein, I understand you're doing this by way of background, but understand, I'm not litigating all of that.
I understand, Your Honor.
What I have to do is determine whether there have been defamatory statements made against your client, and then determine, because that goes to substantial likelihood of success on the merits, and then consider the irreparable harm, lack of adequate remedy at law. I mean, so I understand the background.
Move on, Your Honor.
I mean, I'm sure Mr. Schoenberger will give me some similar background or disagree with your background, but really the issue is, has there been defamation, actionable defamation, which can be enjoined? That's the issue.
I understand, Your Honor. Let me focus on the specific. I'll move on from the background section. And I also recognize, Your Honor, that when we're talking about the injunction here, we're not trying to enjoin defamation. I understand the First Amendment considerations in connection with this. We're talking about an injunction based upon the damage to my client's business reputation and the impact that this has on his work. So let me just give you a quick, brief summary of this relentless campaign against my client. This sort of starts from the fact that Mr. Schoenberger, there was an individual, he's made almost 200 videos on YouTube from at least 5 different accounts in connection with my client. And this is what we have seen and what we have found and what we have put in with the court. And this is just really the sort of the tip of the iceberg. I'm confident there's others that we don't even see. He's defamed my client specifically by accusing my client of financing an imagined murder of an individual named Isaac Cappy. Mr. Cappy was a former bid actor in Hollywood. He gained internet notoriety during the summer of 2018 with baseless and lurid claims of pedophilia against certain Hollywood celebrities, such as Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg. And that's the tie to my client, in the sense of Mr. Cappy committed suicide. And this is according to numerous local and national news reports. He jumped from a busy highway overpass in Arizona on May 2019. And law enforcement investigated this, and they ruled, as a matter of law, that this was a suicide. And there's no open investigation. Mr. Cappy, he has, in the post that we've submitted with the court, Mr. Schoenberger has alleged that my client was involved in a conspiracy to murder Mr. Cappy. And the tie-in and the damage to my client is significant because Mr. Cappy is an internet figure. He's also a figure in the QAnon conspiracy movement online. And as I'm sure your honor is familiar, QAnon has been labeled by the FBI as a potentially dangerous domestic terror threat. And there are a number of individuals in connection with QAnon that have committed numerous acts of violence and kidnapping. Last summer, for example, it was reported that a QAnon believer had murdered a mob individual in New York. Now, we're not alleging that Mr. Schoenberger is a QAnon follower, but his defamatory clients against my client on this imagined murder of a QAnon figure are incendiary in nature, and they represent a clear danger to my client, on top of the damage to my client's reputation. All it takes is, Your Honor, one crazy individual to believe the allegations that are being spread by Mr. Schoenberger, and my client can be in physical danger. The posts that we have submitted to the court not only focus on Mr. Cappy and this QAnon and murder conspiracy, but he's compared my client to numerous criminals like Jeffrey Epstein, Harvey Weinstein, and Ted Bundy. He's also accused my client, and this goes directly to the business reputation damage, of imagined financial crimes at his hedge fund, and he's defamed my client as a financial terrorist with criminal connections. He claims that my client has family members in the FBI and my client is under investigation. None of this is true, and all of this has been submitted with the court. And on top of this, Your Honor, there are well over 100 occasions that we've submitted where he has labeled my client as a Jewish terrorist, a Jewish domestic terrorist, a Jewish supremacist, part of an imagined Jewish mob, part of the Mossad, the Black Cube, Kosher Nostra, one of the enemies of the American people. We're all being governed by Tel Aviv. These are all posts from Mr. Schoenberger against my client. And what is also important is that these posts have a third-party effect, because there are individuals on the internet that are popularizing this anti-Semitism. One of the notorious figures is Owen Benjamin Smith on the internet. And he coined this term grabbler in connection, it's an anti-Semitic term referring to Jews as grabblers. And the relevance of this is that in Mr. Schoenberger's posts, he refers to Mr. Hoffman as grabbler babe using this. He's defamed my client on top of it as being a pedophile protector. He has this imagined view that my client's movie on Open Secret is protecting the real pedophiles in Hollywood. He's invented all these fabrications about my client, and all of these are reflected in multiple YouTube videos from Mr. Schoenberger. And this is continued. This is continued from the time of service to the original hearing last week, and it's continued since last week. And this needs to stop. And that's why we're asking for an injunction, Your Honor. That's why we're asking for a restraining order. And it's perfectly appropriate. And one of the individuals that Mr. Schoenberger has even, tied himself with is an individual named Mr. Jaquez, Javier Jaquez. And as I believe Your Honor knows, this was even filed by Mr. Schoenberger yesterday. Mr. Hoffman filed a similar action to this one in the Palm Beach court against Mr. Jaquez. And we argued this. We filed pleadings similar to this, and an order was issued by the court in Palm Beach granting the injunction and restraining Mr. Jaquez from continuing the posts that he had been making against Mr. Hoffman. But Mr. Jaquez, and this is a matter we're probably going to have to pursue again back in that case, but Mr. Jaquez has continued to disregard the court's order. He's not deleted the videos that we asked to be deleted. He continues to defame my client. And in fact, the tie-in to this case, Your Honor, is that Mr. Schoenberger is praising Mr. Jaquez on his websites and in his posting. And he's inciting Mr. Jaquez to continually violate the court order. So we're asking for the exact same relief that we obtained in, it's not a companion case, but it's a similar case to this one in Palm Beach in connection with the defamation of my client. In that case, the court issued an order. We went through all of the elements of injunction, irreparable harm, and an injunction was issued based upon the likelihood of success on the business reputation claim, recognizing that injunctions are not appropriate for defamation cases. And we've furnished the order from the judge in that case. And what we are asking for, Your Honor, is similar relief. We want these accounts to be deleted. We want the YouTube accounts to stop with the postings, stop using this platform, stop inciting other third parties to defame Mr. Hoffman, delete all of these accounts. And I will include all of this, Your Honor, in an order, a proposed order, because these accounts are numerous and they're complicated. Because as I said, what Mr. Schoenberger does is he opens an account, he gets suspended, then he reopens an account, he has another one. This is not the easiest to trace. And we have been trying to do that. And he's doing it on different platforms. And what we are going to submit, Your Honor, is a detailed order which requests the deletion of the postings that have occurred, the stopping of future postings, and listings of all the accounts that are being used, so the court can put all of that in an order, so that my client is no longer defamed, his reputation is no longer being damaged by these imagined murder accusations, anti-Semitism, financial claims in connection with this. Your Honor, I'm going to stop. I think I've probably made enough of a record, but we have additional information in connection with this that I will gladly furnish to the court about death threats that have been brought against my client by an individual known as ABC. We furnished information to the court. His name's Alessandro Valerin Castellano, AVC, and his death threats have been specific emails to my client, and he's being encouraged by Mr. Schoenberger. And also there's somebody named Mr. McQuaid, an individual who's also involved in litigation. Mr. Schoenberger has been working with him. Just like the last video that was made before this hearing, Mr. Schoenberger is trying to raise money to group together individuals to attack my client and defame my client. And I know that an injunction is an extraordinary remedy. And Your Honor, we've received an injunction for another judge in this court for similar accusations. And Your Honor, I believe that there's no case that's more appropriate than this one, that needs, this horror just needs to stop against my client. And these false allegations need to stop. There is no basis for any of these. Mr. Cappy died from suicide. There's no murder investigation going on, yet this conspiracy is being perpetuated. And Your Honor, with that, I will allow Mr. Schoenberger to unless Your Honor has any specific.
Well, I have one question for you here, Mr. Schoenberger. I mean, the Jacques case in front of Judge Kelley, I mean, there was an injunction, but he didn't appear to defend that, did he?
He appeared, we had two hearings. We had an initial status conference, and Mr. Jacques appeared at the status conference, and Judge Kelley told him that we were going to have an injunction hearing, and he determined on his own not to appear at that injunction hearing.
Yes, because I talked to Judge Kelley.
Yes, no, he didn't appear at that hearing. He did appear at the first hearing, and in that first hearing, he accused Judge Kelley as being owned by my client and being paid off by my client.
Okay, all right. Well, let me go ahead. I've got some direction I'll give to both sides at the end of the hearing, but let me hear from Mr. Schoenberger.
Thank you, Your Honor. I feel like I've just watched a 20-minute fiction movie. First and foremost, the most salient point of this matter is that on May 27th, 2019, I did not know who Gabe Hoffman was. I didn't know his work. I didn't know his net worth. I didn't know who he was. And what he wrote, this is 2 weeks after Isaac Cappy died, he writes on his public platform and Open Secret, to be clear, the physical documented evidence is overwhelming that Isaac Cappy and Isaac Cappy alone committed suicide. Researchers should focus on Thomas Schoenberger and his relationship with IK. To understand IK's life, actions, and state of mind from July 2018 to May 2019. So he got 41 likes on that. This was metastasized all over the place. He continued on May 28th and May 29th. These are days that I didn't know who Gabe Hoffman was. I had no idea why he was attacking me. And I was attacked not only by him, but by his mob. He produced a very famous film on pedophilia. In actuality, he couldn't find a buyer and self-released it. But the bottom line is, I didn't hit him first. I was defending myself. He went ahead and he accuses me of being an entity killed, Rachel 56417-405, and he says harassment like quote unquote Jew boy and worse, many times each day. Please keep in mind, Your Honor, that this is the same man who is in the entertainment field that I am. And so he continues, we're clearly on target, exposing Thomas Schoenberger of SCADA 3301 as Isaac Cappy's handler, and he is very angry. Now, first off, I was not Isaac Cappy's handler. That would have included a bilateral management agreement. I was in the entertainment business for 2 decades. I know what it means. But what he was doing was putting out there that I was behind his suicide. I didn't do this to him. Gabe Hoffman complains that he's getting blowback after publicly throwing me to the mob. Okay. As early as days before the August 13th hearing, he was publicly on the Defendant show, that's the name of Manuel Chavez, giving out the Zoom and the password, encouraging people to join in as if it was a pay-per-view boxing event. He was gloating. If this is a man who was looking for injunctive relief, number one, he would not have attacked me first. And number two, he would not have continued to mention me over 250 times on the internet. And by the way, as we're talking about QAnon, Defengo, aka Manuel Chavez III, has made claims publicly and repeatedly that he created QAnon. So when Mr. Klein talks about QAnon being a dangerous right-wing conspiracy, well, I've never been a part of QAnon. Number two, he will subtly go in and say, my client is making death threats. I've never made a death threat to him. And he was the one who came at me with a mob. I don't have that sort of following. I have less than 500 followers on my YouTube. I have less than 200 on my Twitter. He's got 50,000 plus. He carries great influence. And he's going ahead and publicly stating that I am the reason why Isaac killed himself. And here's the other part, Your Honor. Isaac Cappy did have an enemy, and it was one of us. But it wasn't me. It was Gabe Hoffman. Isaac Cappy, 2 days before he died, he was on Periscope, which is a social media platform. Someone asked him, are you suicidal? Blink twice if no. And he blinked twice. Mr. Hoffman has repeatedly pushed the suicide narrative. There was a scant investigation. The lady that he is right now subpoenaing, Ashley Reagan Early, she now filed a restraining order against Mr. Hoffman because he violated her privacy. We want to go back into my history. We want to talk about Lisa Vizza, the woman who did a restraining order against me, I think in 2012. The police investigated, and in her complaint, she claimed that I called her on the phone. They grabbed her phone and found I had never made a phone call. So that was false. It is no longer a current restraining order whatsoever. The one that was sent from Pennsylvania is a cohort of Gabe Hoffman. And let me tell you something. Gabe Hoffman has repeatedly been on the Defengo show. The Defengo show exists to attack and to dox people. They've done it to me. I am now currently working with law enforcement, both in Carson City and other areas, to put together a RICO complaint. I've had over 7 interactions with the detective, and literally, this is gang stalking. Imagine this. You admonished both of us. You said, make sure you keep to your corners. So I lived by your word. I took your admonishment as an order. I know there's a syntactical difference between an admonishment and an order, but I took you at your word and showed you that respect and didn't do anything. Meanwhile, I have provided evidence that there have been multiple deleterious things said about me, including more fat shaming, even though I've lost over 25 pounds lately. Someone said I'm playing the Christian card. There's someone who goes by the name OG1 Kenobi. His real name is, well, Mr. Walsh. I will give him the courtesy of not releasing his last name. He's out of Belfast. A guy named Douglas Stewart, who is tied into MAGA Coalition. MAGA Coalition is a pro-Trump PAC that has I'm not sure they're still together. They may have broken up a couple weeks ago. But Glenn Herman, who is a dear friend of both Gabe Hoffman and Manuel Chavez, is on there making a video and putting it up there. And then I have, as part of my exhibit 7, Law Force, that is Defengo, otherwise known as Manuel Chavez. He's the one I have under investigation for wiretapping, for felony solicitation, among other things. He puts out a 1 Bitcoin reward capture. This is a bounty. So while Mr. Klein will bloviate about the danger to his client, who lives in the $79 million mansion, and I'm sure has security and security cameras, here I am with a $11,000 reward for my capture being put out publicly. So the irony is thick as can be. Do I plan to go to Florida? No, I don't have any ties to Florida. The lady who was enjoined and was subpoenaed, I've never met. This man, Julio, I've never had a conversation with him on the phone. I've never met him in person. So a lot of the merits of what Dennis Klein is putting out there, they are meritless. They are. Bottom line is, on May 27th, Gabe Hoffman deliberately put out a rumor that I was behind the suicide of Isaac Cappy. This is how this began.
Okay, Mr. Schoenberger, anything else at this time?
Well, there is. Last week, Gabe Hoffman was on the Defengo show, bragging about the Zoom, bragging about how I was going to be torn to shreds, giving out the password. He's repeatedly made this. His reputation online is about attacking people. He says he's a highly respected hedge fund manager. As I said before, this is really neither here nor there, but his hedge fund is the worst performing hedge fund on Wall Street. He shorted Tesla at $252, and the thing is trading at $1,600. So he can talk about respectability. Maybe he wears a Brooks Brothers suit and a tie, but it's about performance in the hedge fund world. And I did ask around. I'm right now preparing to work with law enforcement and with the SEC. It was not me who put out there that Isaac Cappy was murdered by Dave Hoffman. Several days before Isaac Cappy died, he put out a video saying, "I am not suicidal. If anything bad happens to me, it's Gabe Hoffman. Gabe Hoffman is tied to Jewish mob." That didn't come from me. I have no knowledge of that. I do know that he's sent out Bussard t-shirts to a variety of people. I find that pretty curious. But that doesn't prove that he's worked for either the Mossad or AMAN, which is the military Israeli police. I don't have proof of that. But what I do hear from everybody is his threatening behavior. I have, I guess, until around September 2nd or 3rd to complete my case. But as I said before, if I was a threat in any way or shape or form, I would not have been able to contain myself. I would have made lots more videos, and I would have mentioned him, and I would have pushed for violence against him. I have no doubt that this person, Julio, did threaten violence, but I also know that Julio, prior to his outburst, he had his Twitter shut down, his Patreon shut down, his PayPal shut down by Gabe Hoffman. Gabe Hoffman takes a special plea when he takes people's abilities to make a living, when he takes them down. He has admitted himself to his business partner / boyfriend, Manuel Chavez, that he is out to be a Jewish warrior and to cut down anybody who has anything bad to say about anybody Jewish. And by the way, your Gabe's client or Gabe's attorney, Dennis Klein, mentioned Tom Hanks. No, what's happening is the names being mentioned are Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein, and there is a tie. Gabe Hoffman knows Les Wexner. They both contributed to a PAC called Right to Rise in 2015, and they both contributed 6 figures, and they were attending parties together. So when people say things about Gabe Hoffman, I am always treated as if I am the secret hand. I am not. Gabe Hoffman is under investigation because of his acrimonious fights with Isaac Cappy. Gabe Hoffman, instead of being a hedge fund manager and philanthropist, and he claims that he has been on social media repeatedly, serially, cutting down people, tearing people to pieces, bragging about how he eviscerates their ability to make a living. So what you're being told by Dennis Klein, that the glowing, unbesmirched reputation of Gabe Hoffman, I would suggest that you do a Google search yourself and see what type of reputation he has. He's gloating. I am not a rich man, Your Honor. I compose music, but I'm an honest man, and I don't lie. And I'm telling you right now that you are being fed horse manure by Dennis Klein.
Okay, Mr. Klein.
Your Honor, yes. Quickly, let me just say a few things. First of all, this is all imagined fantasy. Just listening to Mr. Schoenberger and the allegations that he's making, Your Honor, and I'm sure you can recognize these. He hasn't refuted any of the information that I brought up about him being banned from the internet and opening sites. I have put in there in evidence hundreds of documents that reflect the defamation that is being undertaken against my client by Mr. Schoenberger. He is not refuting any of that evidence. He's not saying he didn't make those posts. They're all in evidence, Your Honor. Even now, he's defaming my client. Even now, he's mentioning allegations about my client's sexual orientation in connection with the court, which is not true, Your Honor. I mean, this is just imagined, and it goes on, and there is no evidence to support anything that Mr. Schoenberger is saying. There is plenty of evidence to support everything that I'm saying, Your Honor, and it's in the record. I have filed hundreds and hundreds of pages here, and these postings, I don't know what Mr. Schoenberger is talking about. He's talking about, well, I don't believe this, I don't believe that, I don't say those things. But if you look at what we filed with the court, Mr. Schoenberger has said all of these things. He said all of these postings about my client's imagined murder of Mr. Cappy and my client's unethical financial. Even now he's making allegations about the SEC and my client in connection with things that you're hearing today, Your Honor. I request that this stop. This has to stop. And the only way it's going to stop, at least all you can do to stop this, Your Honor, is to issue the injunction that I'm requesting with the terms that I'm requesting in connection with taking down these videos and refraining from posting. That's all you can do, Your Honor. Whether or not Mr. Schoenberger is going to comply with that and whether or not he's going to follow your order, that's another issue that we'll have to deal with. But at this point, Your Honor, I'm requesting that we've demonstrated clear irreparable harm. We've demonstrated a likelihood of success on the merits, and we've demonstrated that an injunction is the only thing that's going to make this stop. The damages are not a remedy that is going to work in this situation. This is the perfect case, Your Honor, for an injunction, and that's what we're requesting.
Your Honor, if I may.
Quickly,
First off,
close this down in just a minute. But go ahead, Mr. Schoenberger. I'll give you a couple more.
oh, thank you very much, Your Honor. No, actually, I've been very, very direct in refuting things. I refer you once more to the May 29th, 2019 post where Mr. Hoffman says, harassment like Jew boy and worse many times each day, and then mentions an account that is not mine. I'm being falsely accused constantly. It gets to the point where I have a right to defend myself. If Mr. Hoffman was not on YouTube inviting people to the Zoom, telling people, oh, well, he doesn't look fit, and he obviously has mental illness. This is the same type of thing he did to Isaac Cappy. I have more evidence that if given a couple more days, I can show you. And this is going to be evidence that includes video evidence. It's going to show donation evidence to Right to Rise, which was the 2015 pact which Bush headed, where you can see a definitive tie with Lex Wexner, who we know is intimately tied to Jeffrey Epstein and to Ghislaine Maxwell. I can also prove to you more than half a dozen times where he's falsely accused me of being someone else. And as far as Mr. Klein, let me tell you what detritus is. Him telling you in hundreds of pages that I'm inciting someone named Adam Green. He's making up things out of whole cloth. And it's not the quantity, it's the quality. And if given one more week, I can once again promise you there will be no mention of Gabe Hoffman, and what I can get you will be evidence that will prove that not only that Gabe Hoffman is working in a gangland style, but that Mr. Hoffman is breaking Florida law. That's what is going on. I have a reason for the fear. This is aggravated misconduct, and Florida State, explicitly defines cyberbullying as bullying through the use of technology or any electronic communication. That's Florida State ANN 1006.147. The statute includes email, internet communications, instant messages, faxes, websites, blogs, all on the destructive and non-exclusive list of electronic means. In the emergency plea for a seal on this, you can see 14 examples of it, and each one you will see merit. If given one more week, I can include another 50, and that includes collusion with people that are dangerous. This is not, Isaac Cappy died under mysterious circumstances. Do we know that it's a suicide for sure? We know officially that's where it stands now, but we also know that cold cases are opened up all the time. And Mr. Hoffman has gone ahead and pointed to major news media outlets as proof that it was suicide. I was accused of another murder by Mr. Hoffman and one of his associates. I would like, sure, if I could get one more week, and I will show you evidence of that. So this is going to prove collusion, that this is not Mr. Hoffman under attack. This is Mr. Hoffman weaponizing a gang to destroy my reputation, my ability to make a living, maybe to try to make me suicidal. This is exactly what Isaac Cappy and another defendant is accusing Gabe Hoffman. Please keep in mind, Gabe Hoffman was just issued an emergency restraining order by Ashley Reagan 3 days ago. And Mr. Klein has made no mention of that.
Yeah, I really got to cut this off, guys. We're out of a lot of time. I got to give some directions as to what I need you to do.
Sure.
First of all, Mr. Schoenberger, you can file this case is just starting. This is a temporary injunction. So you can file your answer next week. If you've got some kind of counter petition for injunctive relief, you're free to file that. So all of that can come in at a later time. We're just dealing with whether I grant a temporary injunction at this time. What I'm going to ask the parties to do, Mr. Klein, you indicated that you wanted to submit some sort of proposed order. I'll invite proposed orders from both sides in terms of this particular injunction. Now, keep in mind, it should just address the relief that's requested here. I'm also going to direct you, because I think it's important, to some recent case law out of the 4th District Court of Appeal. You will not find this yet on Westlaw. You're going to have to go to the 4th DCA's website. The case was just decided August 12th, 2020. Excellent discussion by the 4th DCA of what can and cannot be enjoined with respect to defamation. The name of the case is Ashley Ann Krapakis, Krapacs, versus Nisha E. Bacchus, Baccus. I'll just give you the 4th DCA case number. It's 4th DCA case number 4D19-641. I give that to you because I've raised this concern before. I've heard all of this evidence, and I could comment on it. I'm not going to at this time. But the big issue becomes, what is the appropriate remedy in circumstances like this? And the law is fairly settled on it. So take a look at it. If there's any commentary anyone wants to make with respect to that case law, it's fine. Otherwise, I think I understand the law. But I do want proposed orders from both sides. Mr. Klein, you want to prepare a detailed order, you said, which addressed certain specifics. So I'm going to invite you to do that. Mr. Schoenberger, if you want to submit any kind of competing order, you can also do that. I do have to set a time limit on when I'm going to get those orders. They need to be relatively quick. I'll start with Mr. Klein, then I'll go to Mr. Schoenberger. Now, Mr. Schoenberger, your order should be fairly simple. All you'd want is a denial at this point, because there's so I mean, your order, you don't even have to submit an order if you don't want. I mean, it's Mr. Klein that's asking for a detailed order. So your order would be fairly simple. If you think the relief should simply be denied, I just need an order saying denied. Mr. Klein, how long is it going to take you to prepare your order?
By getting in by Monday, is that a problem?
No, that's fine. I mean, both sides get your proposed order. Mr. Schoenberger, like I said, your order is fairly simple. Monday, okay?
Your Honor,
Okay.
I do want to correct that Ashley Reagan does not have a restraining order against my client. What she filed in this case was a motion for protective order in connection with a subpoena that was issued. So I just need to correct the record on that. But by Monday, I will get a proposed order. Thank you very much, Your Honor. I will take a look at that case that you've also mentioned and present comment on that if appropriate.
Yeah, Ms. Klein, you can do the same thing. You can comment on the case if you like. I mean, it deals with whether or not you can, in fact, enjoin anyone from posting on the internet. It deals specifically with that issue. So take a look at it. It was in a stalking case. It was actually a petition against cyber-stalking is the way the case began. So it's a good discussion of the law. I think both sides should look at it and be prepared to, if you need to, comment on it when you submit your proposed orders. But go ahead and get that done for me, please. And I will.
Yes, Your Honor. And if I could ask a quick question. I had asked for an emergency motion for injunctive relief for suppressive gag order. Can I submit that Monday along with the denial, along with further evidence? Would that be okay with you, Your Honor?
Well, I'm not clear what you're submitting, Mr. Schoenberg. What do you mean by submitting?
Well, what's happening is the 24 people that are listening in, they're going to the internet and they're saying horrible things about me. I believe, it's my personal belief, that Gabe Hoffman is part of a gang and that he's part of this, and that, this is further defamation and reputational harm that is going to show up on the internet. And as I said before, I'm not going to respond to it out of respect to your wishes. But what I'd like to do is resubmit my emergency motion for injunctive relief for suppression gag order on Monday. I'd also like to add a supplemental with further evidence on Monday. And then, of course, I'll have to look into the denial. I do have one of the attorneys who Hoffman is up against, who has been giving some direction to me, as you can probably tell. So,
let me comment.
yeah,
on
so
you can file, look, the parties in any action are permitted to file whatever motions they believe are appropriate. Now, whether I believe those motions can be legally granted, that's what I'm here for. But you can submit and file a motion or a supplemental motion, if that's what you want to do, and request that it be set for hearing. Now, I may not consider it an emergency, but it could get set in the normal course, or I may consider it an emergency. So if you wish to file anything, you can file it. This lawsuit is just beginning at this point. I mean, I know it was filed a while ago, but there really hasn't much happening in this case, and you haven't filed an answer yet. So you're going to be filing an answer. Discovery to proceed. I don't know how we're proceeding in this case right now, but we're at the beginning stages. So you can seek whatever you like. I will just give you this warning. Gag orders, almost impossible to get those affirmed on appeal. They're just, they're a little bit different than defamation. There's a different set of case law that deals with gag orders.
Civil procedure 1.610. I've been studying. You're right.
It won't be my first gag order or request for one, but I'm just telling you, they're very, very okay.
Well,
I really have one request, Your Honor, real quick. The request is at the last hearing, you admonished the parties not to post anything on the internet between that time and the hearing. And my client fulfilled that obligation, didn't post anything. We submitted a letter, Your Honor, with 3 postings from Mr. Schoenberger. Could you please admonish the parties again to not post any more between now and when we get this resolved by the orders?
Listen, okay. An admonishment is not an order of the court, okay? I've not entered an injunction yet. So there's me saying, keep it clean till we meet again. That's just a request. Candidly, it's not, I haven't ordered anything. When I order something, it's enforceable by power of contempt, but I haven't ordered anything yet. So yeah, I'm suggesting the parties keep it clean till we meet again, but it's not an order.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I've got to take everything into consideration. So I'm doing. Once I order something, if there's a violation, if there's a violation, and if I can enforce it, I'll enforce it. But we're not there yet.
I appreciate it, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay.
Your Honor, thank you. And one thing that you said before struck me, which is you said both sides stay in your corner, but also if others are using proxies to say negative things to harm reputation, that weakens the case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to be silent, and I'm going to continue to collect evidence to demonstrate to you that what is happening is what is happening. Nothing speaks louder than evidence. So I'll be able to do that. I expect from this hearing today, August 20th, I expect that when the next week is over, I'll have another 20 to 30 negative things said about me on the internet that continues to harm me. So I'm making a prediction. I'm not in the business of prophecy, but I do understand patterns.
Well, Mr. Schoenberger, you understand, I don't control and cannot control what people say after they've attended a public hearing. I've had people in the courtroom go out in the street and call Judge Kelley an idiot. It's people have I can't control what people, and the only people I have jurisdiction over right now are the plaintiff and defendant in the case. So what other people do may be unfortunate, but I don't have direct control over that. That's not something that's within my jurisdiction or power to do, and people will do what they're going to do. And I can only control the parties that are in front of me. So I hope it doesn't get out of hand, but like I said, I've had people leave a courtroom, not parties generally, but people that have watched and didn't like a ruling I made, or some that did, and go out and make public comments. I live with it. That's their right to do it,
Well, you won't see that from me, and anger is usually a worthless emotion when you're dealing with an adversarial legal situation.
I'm not arguing with you. I think your strategy, if you're proposing a strategy of keep quiet and collect evidence, is probably a good strategy. So I'll see you guys again.
Thank you very much, Delmer.
Orders to me
Sure.
and decide whether there's anything I can do here or not. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Honor.